Speedrunning Grand Theft Auto 5 is more complicated than ever, and a big reason for that is all the weird ways that you can warp yourself from A to B. This video will largely focus on the patch that speedrunners use, which is 1.27, as these techniques sometimes work on the latest patch, but other times do not. Obviously, every technique isn't equally as useful, but I will be covering all 16 methods in this video, starting with the simplest, save warping. So you want to get to your safe house, so you save and load the game, and while loading in, you hold down a character swap button of a character that you're not loading into. In other words, if you're loading into Franklin, you want to hold down the character swap button for either Michael or Trevor. For Michael, it's one of the switch buttons for Trevor or Franklin, and for Trevor, it's one of the switch buttons for Michael or Franklin. Michael and Franklin only have one safe house at a time, so you always know where they're going to end up, but as Trevor has two safe houses, it is determined by which is shown on his map. If you are in the southern half of the map, you get sent to his southern safe house, and if you are in the north, you get sent to the northern one. The downsides of this warp are obvious. You can only go to your safe house and you lose time loading the game. It has also been made somewhat obsolete by other warps, but an example of how this was used was going from the end of Complications straight to the start of Father-Son. This being the first time that Michael visits his safe house, he's actually warped out the front. The next warp is closely related and sometimes called the Mission Replay Save Warp, which is a stupid name as it doesn't involve saving, but it does help distinguish it from other warps. This technique is exactly the same as save warping, except rather than saving and loading, you start and leave a mission replay. You still hold down the same button when loading in to get the exact same effect, but this has the small benefit that you can do it underwater, which is a place where you can't bring out your phone to save the game to facilitate a save warp. This is really the only condition where this warp would be used, because loading into a mission replay, then leaving it, and loading into the game takes a long time. In every other context, there's just a faster warp that you could use. One of the more natural but less consistent ways to warp your character is to just load an autosave. Not only does loading an autosave remove your wanted level, but it has the capability to put you in your safe house or one of the random switch locations for each character that is relevant for that time of day and part of the story. Here, for example, Franklin buys a stock, which makes an autosave specifically the first time you do it in a playthrough. He then loads the autosave and he ends up in his safe house. But here, for example, Michael buys a weapon, then loads the autosave, and he ends up at the hotel on a date with Amanda.
Oh shit, is that the time? I gotta go. Got a meeting at the studio.
Unfortunately, knowing where you're going to teleport to with an autosave is basically impossible. While loading into your safe house is surprisingly the default, this doesn't happen if any of these 5 ambiguous conditions is mess, which at least during a speedrun is a lot of the time, so most autosaves give a random switch location, which is not usually useful due to its lack of predictability.
I love that boat.
Fortunately, this is all solved with the autosave warp, which is just a save warp using an autosave. Sadly, there is no quick and repeatable way to force an autosave, but anytime where one is made by the game and we want to be at our safe house, we can avoid the time it takes to bring out our phone and save the game by just using the autosave provided by the game instead. This actually saves even more time at the end of some missions, as the game can autosave long before the mission pass screen actually completes and we get back control of our character to make a save file, making the autosave considerably faster over a traditional save. Next is something far more complex, the replay warp. You need to be in a vehicle and select the start a mission replay, but do not confirm to actually start it. Despite not doing so, the game thinks you have gone into a mission replay, and therefore has been told to remember to spawn you at this location with that vehicle the next time you load the game. This means that you can go somewhere else, save your game progress, and then load the game, and this loading makes the game think you are leaving a mission replay, so you should be spawned in that previous location rather than where you made the save. In summary, you go from where you are to where you were before, and you lose no game progress. A small issue with this warp is that while it always works when done with two different characters, for it to work with the same character, you either need to blow up the car you made the replay in, or move 100 units away from where you set it up. Neither of these requirements is particularly difficult, but they are still important to know. Probably the most significant replay warp is the one used to get to Carta Libre. At the end of the Mission 3's company, Trevor is in a helicopter near Martin Madrazo's house, which is the start of Carta Libre. So you set the warp location with a mission replay, play the game until the end of Mr. Richards, and then save and load the game, warping Michael to where Trevor was previously and giving Michael Trevor's helicopter. Something more simple is the hangout warp, which just abuses the game's hangout mechanic.
Hey T, so you want to do something? I'm bored, man.
When you call someone for a hangout, that character is warped to a hangout spot based on your current location. With just a phone call, you have warped a character, but even better, if you switch to that character, the character you made the phone call with will also be warped to the hangout spots. So for the simple price of one phone call, you warp two different characters.
Franklin, my main dude.
I should note that you can't always start hangouts. At some points in the game, the characters might not be speaking to each other or will simply say that they're busy.
You wanna hang out?
Not now, bro. We got stuff to take care of.
No problem, man. Some other time.
Additionally, as the hangout spot is determined by where you're making the call, this does limit the warp possibilities. It is also important to note that some locations that you call from actually can have multiple hangout spots attached to them, meaning that one will just be chosen at random. A good example of where this is used is after the mission Daddy's little girl to get to casing the jewel store. We get a suit from Michael's house, call Franklin for a hangout, switch to Franklin, and then switch to Michael. The result is that we've not only warped Michael from his house to much closer to Lester's factory, but we've also given him a car that he can use to drive to case in the jewel store. As you likely know, death warping is a commonly used natural function of the game. If you want to warp to the hospital of the region you are in, you just kill yourself. It even works if you kill yourself in a mission to leave it. If you're curious, this map shows which of the 5 hospitals you will spawn at depending upon where you die. But it's possible to do a wrong death warp, which changes the hospital you spawn at when you die. This is achieved by starting a mission replay, dying while in the car, making sure not to press enter during the death animation, and then pressing to leave the mission replay. Now next time you die, rather than spawning at the hospital relevant for the area, you'll spawn at the hospital relevant for the area you died in the mission replay. In some categories, this strategy is used to warp to the other side of the map after completing one of the setups for the big score. Hospital warping is quite different from this and doesn't work on every patch. In fact, patch 1.27 that we use to speedrun is the only patch I'm aware of this glitch ever working on. This glitch makes it so you warp to a hospital immediately after a mission completes. To set up this glitch, you just need to mission fail and then die before the mission fail screen takes you out of the scene. You can do this at literally any point during a mission, and as long as you don't die again, the glitch will activate at the end of the mission. In Blitzplay, for example, we first explode Michael, who we don't control, and this fails the mission, but we then explode Franklin, causing his death. In this case, we've not only set up the warp, but we've also skipped a bit of dialogue. In the case where we didn't set up this warp, at the end of the mission when we got control of Michael, we'd have to blow ourselves up with a grenade. This is the only explosive that Michael has, and understandably, this takes far longer. A mission switch warp is a faster method of warping to your safe house as it avoids any loading, but it is the hardest warp method. I'm sure you've noticed that when you start a mission, the other points of interest disappear off the map, and when the mission ends, they appear back. These changes to your map work to show exactly when you're transitioning in and out of a mission. The trick is that if you try to switch characters during the frames where you transition in or out of a mission, you instantly warp to your safe house without any loading. It is sadly the case that hitting those exact frames is quite hard and you get limited chances to do so. For example, at the end of the mission Daddy's Little Girl, ideally we'd like to perform a mission switch warp. So at a particular point we lock our FPS to 16, hold Alt and spam the character switch button for Franklin. If you happen to hit the right frames, you succeed and you warp to Michael's house. If you fail, you instantly start losing time because every other warp is not as fast. The next fastest option is to try a mission switch warp again, but this time by calling a booty call, which counts as a mission. With a booty call, you're not trying to switch at the end of a mission, but at the beginning of it. So you again lock your FPS to 16, hold Alt, and spam character swap, trying to hit the exact right frames and warp to Michael's house. It is also possible to do this warp with a taxi job, and if you already have a taxi, it's often faster. It is essentially done the same way. You start a taxi job and then cancel it, and try to switch on the right frames.
I'll take it.
The on mission 0 skip is a way to warp to a later checkpoint in a mission, and it has become far easier than when it was first discovered. While the setup can be done with many different side missions, Cletus's first mission with Trevor is almost always used.
Hey, bud. What you do? Nothing.
This is because compared to other side missions, it is easier, faster, more accessible, and you can skip more checkpoints. To set up the glitch, we first start next to the mission in a vehicle, and then we start a mission replay, but back out of it in order to not confirm it. Then once Trevor steps out of his car, we pause and start director mode. Once we spawn at the trailer, rather than going into director mode, we simply quit back to story mode. Now back in the main game, we blow ourselves up with C4. When we respawn, we are still in the mission, but no other points of interest have been removed from the map. We then quickly progress multiple checkpoints in the mission, usually to the 5th checkpoint, and set up to transfer this checkpoint progress to another mission. We first must call Ursula or Liz to begin a one-night stand, which allows us to move far away from Cletus without failing. We then travel to another mission, where we want to transfer the checkpoint progress and blow ourselves up before it fully begins. This then warps us to the equivalent checkpoint in the new mission, the same amount of checkpoints we progressed in Cletus's mission. Setting this glitch up and taking the time to progress through Cletus's mission is often faster than doing particularly long missions, which is why this is useful. While it doesn't perfectly fit the theme of this list, I still think I should include the buffered ledge grab. While this can be done on console, I know more about it on PC, and specifically on PC, you need to make sure that your hotkeys for jump and phone special button are not the same. As long as this is the case, you simply take cover on something climbable with your phone up and attempt to climb. This surprisingly stores the climb animation that you can then activate when you put your phone down, warping you back to where you stored the animation. You can also get back into cover and put down your phone, and the glitch will then activate once you move out of cover. As a matter of fact, on the latest patch, this second method is the only way to activate this glitch. Unfortunately, there's a heap of restrictions when it comes to this glitch. For example, if you drive a car, you need to take cover again once you leave the car for it to work. The warp is also tied to the object, not the location where you perform the glitch. This means you can do it on a car, drive the car somewhere else, and you will still reliably warp back to that car. You can also blow up the thing you're warping to, causing you to launch into the air. You usually can't take the warp through a cutscene unless your character is in cover when the cutscene ends, like on Bury the Hatchet. The max distance you can even warp is debatable, as you need the object you set the warp up on to still be loaded into the game to activate the glitch and get to it. If it isn't loaded in, you just warp a small distance. And as you likely know from playing the game, objects are more likely to despawn the further you are away from them, but there are exceptions, the main one being the last vehicle that you drove, which will not despawn for 10 minutes regardless of how far you travel away from it. Until recently, it was believed that when you go into a mission and drive other vehicles, as long as those vehicles were spawned by the mission, it would not change the last vehicle that you drove, and so the vehicle you drove prior to the mission wouldn't despawn. It turns out that isn't true. If you want to go into a mission without your previously driven vehicle despawning, you need the mission to show you a cutscene that changes the time of day. For some reason, this makes it so your previously driven vehicle isn't despawned by the mission. This allows you to do mega buffered ledge grabs like the one in Legal Trouble, even if you're in a mission. Garage warping is more of a novelty than a serious speedrun strategy, but there are two ways to perform it. The first is using fire to knock yourself off a bike during the animation of going into a garage. The second is starting a taxi job and quickly entering a garage with another vehicle while the taxi dispatch is still talking and spamming to get out of the vehicle. In both cases, you don't end up in the garage, but the game thinks you are in one. The understandable result is that the game treats you like you're in the garage, meaning the next time you drive a vehicle, it will teleport you to going out of the garage. The second setup is more useful because you can prevent yourself from being warped back by putting up your interaction menu. With the first method, you'll just warp back the next vehicle you drive, but with the second method, you can drive one vehicle to another vehicle and warp that second vehicle back. Moving on to those I'm including just for the sake of completeness, a busted warp is getting arrested to warp to the police station. They also, of course, take all your guns, and while you can technically get arrested on any wanted level, you realistically can only have it done on 1 star, as it is the only one they don't shoot you to death. Although for the hell of it, here's an example of being busted on 5 stars. Keep in mind that Noose will just drag you out of the car and won't arrest you, it has to be standard cops. A checkpoint warp requires you knowing where the respawn point is for each checkpoint in missions. On Surveying the Score, for example, when we switch to Trevor, the respawn point for this checkpoint is up the road, so mission failing respawns you further ahead, faster than driving to that point. When you reach the next checkpoint, the respawn point for this checkpoint is being in the helicopter with Lester, so mission failing after hitting the checkpoint warps you into the helicopter, which is faster than getting out and waiting for Lester to get in. There are many ways to get out of bounds in GTA 5, and this can sometimes be useful because falling far enough out of bounds warps you back to the surface. While this can't warp you inside of buildings, you do fall much faster than any other form of travel, which is great if you want to meet the conditions of leaving a particular area. For example, to spawn Legal Trouble after we complete Battle of Rocco, we fall out of bounds, moving far enough away so it spawns, and then we get warped back to the surface next to the mission. Having now seen this video, I hope when you watch GTA 5 speedruns in the future, things you see will be more understandable for you. On the occasion when I do runs these days, there will always be people in chat going, I don't understand what's going on, what is this glitch, how did you warp there? And this video will be something I'll reference in the future so people can easily understand. I hope you enjoyed the video, thank you for watching, and I wish you all the best.